In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the Gadigal and Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which we record this podcast. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and future, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people listening today. Do you have a chronic health condition and/or a disability? Or do you support someone living with a chronic health condition or disability? Hi, I'm Joel.
And I'm Lani, and we're Imperfectly Human. Welcome to Chronic Conundrums, a podcast from the Sydney Children's Hospitals Network, all about our chronically chaotic lives. In our journeys with a chronic condition, we must become expert navigators of the extraordinary, because every day presents a new challenge.
We're here to tell you what to gain from those aches and pains, because we're more than just patients, surgeries, and prescriptions. We're people too.
Today, we invite you into our living rooms for lively discussions among family. We have brought our siblings on the set to shed a new light on the chronic illness experience. Welcome to Ethan, Kayla, and Genevieve.
Hi, I'm Kayla. I'm 16 years old and I'm Lani's sister.
Hi, I'm Ethan. I'm 20. I am Lani and Kayla's brother.
Nice. So, would you like to tell me a bit about your experience and your perspective of when I was diagnosed?
There was no real lead up because we were kept from a lot of the information of what was going on. But I knew that you'd be fine. I was like, it's all gonna be okay.
If I was too close to all of the information, I think I would have been too emotional and too much of a mess to help you. And yeah, I feel like we were kind of distanced from it, but it was kind of a mutual distancing. It wasn't necessarily our parents. Yeah, I think a lot of my memories have been subconsciously blocked out of my head. I just remember it was a time of lots of stress. I mean, for me at least, there was no real sequence of events. It was kind of just like a stream of...
All muddled together.
Yeah, everything was muddled together.
Hello, and welcome to my interview portion of the episode with my sibling, my little sister, Genevieve.
Hi.
So how old are you?
I'm 17 years old.
17, and I'm 18. So we are fairly close in age. You've been in my life as long as I can remember. How did our family approach the conversation of keeping everyone updated during the hospitalisation process? And what was the effect of that on you?
Well, I feel like, if I can remember correctly, I found out at the dinner table.
Right, yeah.
And it was a very brief conversation. It wasn't very, in-depth or anything. Overall, I was actually kept in the dark quite a lot, which did take a toll overall because I had no idea what was going on a lot of the time. Yeah. And then I just hear from random, extended family members, oh, by the way. And I'm like, oh, what? I didn't know that was going on.
Right, yeah.
I don't think our family dynamic, within us, the communication was pretty lacked.
Sure.
Which is all right, I guess that it's hard to communicate and I guess that I was young, but the keeping updated during the diagnosis and the hospitalisation process, that was very, I don't know. Yeah, it was a bit weird. And it affected me, it did, but then I kind of got used to it and I kind of enjoyed not knowing because I didn't want to hear the negatives. I'd rather hear more, positives than negatives. I wouldn't want to call mum and be like, what's going on? And then hear something that I don't want to hear. So... I don't know. I kind of grew to kind of not having a full understanding or full update.
Is that sort of protecting yourself in a way?
Yeah, I feel like that's me putting up a wall, a barrier of protection, just overall to save myself from that hurt or anything. It was hard. It was actually very hard, the stress and not not really fully understanding what was going on. That obviously took a toll on my mental health overall.
I don't think I'd heard of lupus before your diagnosis. I think it was just one of the things in the long list of possible things it could be before you got the diagnosis. I remember being confused about what a lot of the stuff was, scared about what some of the things were.
I remember when they thought I had leukemia and we had to wait for the results. It was like at the end of the week.
I remember that day.
But what was really weird for me, because I went to school like every single day. And I was like telling my friends, well, not telling everyone, I was telling who I thought at the time was my close friends. And when I went to the appointment later that day, I remember Mom and Dad were both crying. I was like, what's happening? Why are we crying? Why are we doing this? Because the whole time I'd been going to school, coming home, eating dinner, going to sleep. It felt like normal. Yeah. And then suddenly I'm in this room about to find out something. And my parents are there, sat next to me, about to cry. That's sort of when it I actually had to think about it, which I'm sort of glad that I didn't have that realization before. The only time I had that real emotional realization was 2 minutes before finding out I didn't have leukemia. So that 2 minutes is better than 5 days of that emotional state.
I remember just feeling proud. You were controlling kind of the only thing that you could control which is
How you
your life and how you were reacting to it. My only memory, I was at school and I was doing an engineering competition, so I was just in a room with a few of my friends and I wasn't doing any classes, and I remember wishing that I did do the classes because I was able to distract myself and actually do the work. Because I was doing this engineering competition, I had a lot of free time and I was doing a lot of waiting.
Yeah.
And I remember I was watching TV shows on my laptop, trying not to think about it, trying to overstimulate my brain to not think about it. But it ended up being lunchtime, which is, I think, around the time when I was most texting and asking. And I just remember trying to play soccer and texting everyone. To me, it was, is it leukemia or is it not leukemia?
Yeah.
That was
the
kind of things in my head.
Yeah.
I don't know if I actually got the diagnosis, if you got the diagnosis at the time, during lunch when I was texting, but I just remember freaking out. And I think I'm not sure if I broke down or not, but I was pretty close. That's what I remember, just being close to crying in the middle of this oval on a normal high school day. And I don't think a lot of people knew what was happening either. The last time that we talked about it, our parents were telling me that they remembered how,
You had called them up.
Yeah, I had called them because I was doing dance classes at the time, and apparently, this is through hearing about it, apparently I had broken down in class and left to go to the bathroom and called, and was really crying on call. And I think, I was really breaking down apparently, and apparently the teacher came out and talked, I think.
And you
I'm
don't
not
remember this?
I don't remember any of this. So I think it's, I think it's just my brain trying to block out, the fear and the memory. Thinking about it now, I was probably feeling guilty about freaking out like that because I'm I'm not even the one.
Yeah, there's no reason.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't help and it doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
And that was probably why I got so upset because I couldn't do anything. And me getting upset wasn't going to do anything either. So it was just, it was a bit of helplessness. And that's why we were so proud that even though the situation is kind of out of your hands, and you kind of just had to experience it all, you were able to control the aspects of your life that you could control.
Yeah, I think I completely shut down the emotional aspect of that entire experience. Because, even telling my friends what was happening, I would be, laughing as it was happening. There was no emotional aspect at all.
Was that an intentional decision to kind of preserve
I
yourself?
just felt like I had the responsibility to. Like,
What do you mean, like, responsibility for who? For yourself?
for myself and
Not
for,
to worry.
Yeah, not to worry other people. I just felt like at the time I just had to deal with what I could deal with. I was in such physical pain
Yeah.
that it's not like I had the capacity to be emotionally
Yeah,
Right,
you had the
okay.
time to.
Yeah, like in the times where I'm like, okay, this could be the diagnosis or this, it would more just be like, no matter what happens, at least they'll know so that I can feel better.
Yeah. I
Like
think,
whether it could be like the worst diagnosis or like the best, at least the doctors will be able to fix it or at least try.
Yeah.
Rather than being with this pain that's getting increasingly worse
yeah.
that no one had any idea about.
Yeah.
So I feel like there just wasn't any space for my mind to be like, oh, this diagnosis is scary. Oh, this experience is like overwhelming. But that's just like the personal way that I had to deal with it.
It could have been beneficial as maybe, say, during primary school, if we were able to hear more about these kind of stories. Do you know what I mean? And how families do it. Not just to give us kind of perspective in the breadth of different experiences that families can go through.
Yeah.
I think I have vague memories of primary school hearing how certain adults deal with disabilities and also how certain adults deal with impoverished living conditions.
Yeah.
But I feel like it would also be helpful to hear from families and children who have gone through this, to give us perspective and to understand more about these stories. Because even here, coming into the Starlight Foundation, is that where we are? Just seeing where the environments and passing by children who are dealing with things that I haven't dealt with, it's a perspective shift.
Yeah.
And I feel like it would be beneficial it would have been beneficial for us to understand the way things are before having to deal with it.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember, but when I was hospitalized, how was that for you? Like being at home?
I didn't realize the extent of like lupus until I saw you in pain. I don't know if you remember, but well, you would. At that restaurant where after your surgery, that was when I was really scared for you because you had to go in the hospital for a really long time.
Yeah. Functioning interdependently means co-creating an environment for living with illness and disability, sensitive to changing demands of your condition. As such, chronic conditions can feel central to the family unit, as priorities shift and routines change to accommodate a family member's illness or disability.
So I had the main admission, and then a few months later, I was back in hospital with a few weeks on, a few weeks off, that kind of thing.
I think it impacted our family and our the day-to-day routine a lot, severely a lot. Mum ended up moving into the bottom level of the hospital, so she was there basically 24/7, meaning I didn't get to see her as much, which was very hard.
Yeah.
And family events at Christmas and everything was harder to plan. And getting to school, I moved in with my auntie, so I moved schools for a small amount of time due to that factor, which was a lot different. Like that was so out of routine. Like I was fine at my old school.
Yeah, and you were living in a different city,
Yeah, I was in a different city. And then I also stayed with my other auntie and my grandma. So I was constantly moving around, which was very abnormal for a child who just a couple months prior had a very, very normal day-to-day family routine, normal life.
And it wasn't until probably 7 months in, I think, that Mum started staying at home again. or she'd have days off from the hospital, which sounds so odd to say, having days off from hospital. But it really was basically a full-time job for mum and dad, I think.
I was very self-isolated, especially when COVID hit. It was like also very hard on top of the fact that you and mum were in hospital.
Yeah, because basically the entire of the normal lockdown and quarantine in 2020, I was in hospital for all of that. I think my admission started the week before lockdown and it ended the week after the full restrictions were lifted. So basically the entire quarantine period was super different from everyone else. And for everyone else, it was already super different from their normal. But for us, it was pretty hectic.
Yeah, it was very uncertain. Every day there was no certainty of literally anything.
Yeah.
Didn't see mum at all because of obviously restrictions. I think there were some times where it was just I had no idea what was going on and I was with my auntie or with my grandma. Like I wasn't with either of my parents, so it was a bit hard to fully get like a deeper understanding of what was going on in different times of the day and what was happening and keeping updated. I feel like that was very hard, and those periods of time took like a higher toll on my health, making those times more stressful and higher levels of anxiety compared to other times.
Sure, I think that makes sense. And contextually, the nature of that period was that I was in hospital 24/7 for nearly a year, basically, with very rare instances of being able to leave the hospital. So I think it definitely makes sense for you to have sort of been a bit in the dark as to what was happening, and obviously not being able to use your own initiative of coming to visit me because you couldn't drive a car without our parents, and our parents spending a lot of time with me, not necessarily taking you because you had school and that kind of thing, definitely would have impacted you, which is something I probably haven't thought about as much by myself, but it's definitely been in the back of my mind how tough it was for you as well as me in that era, you know?
The family dynamic and routine was very thrown off.
Yeah, kind of felt weird to adjust back to how it was meant to be, or I say meant to be, or how it was before rather. At least I felt like there sort of wasn't a really standard routine after all those experiences in hospital.
Yeah, I feel like it was very messy, and it still at some points is.
Yeah.
Like it's never fully returned. Like it's always been a bit off routine now, but more routine than it was when you were in hospital. But
yeah, for sure.
Never fully returned to that normal daily structure.
Families need to adapt. This is difficult and it comes with compromise. The day-to-day of managing chronic health conditions and or disability can be a hard pill to swallow, literally.
I don't think you guys ever, saw me in, the ward.
I've seen a few photos.
Yeah, I feel like there were a couple of photos, but it was only either mom or dad that was with me in the room.
Yeah.
No one even came up.
One time I visited you, and you had your computer there and everything. Unless I was just imagining it when you were telling me a story.
I don't remember.
Or maybe it would have been, maybe it was a photo that was sent to me.
And I just...
Yeah.
On FaceTime or something.
Yeah.
I feel like I was there.
Having a sibling with a chronic illness, do you feel that impacted the way that you, impacted your lifestyle?
And, I barely remember it anymore, but now I realize the amount... Because we shared a room.
Yeah.
The amount of times there would be an empty bed next to me. And I'd have to, go to bed. We wouldn't have our late night talks. It was
So you guys had a ritual kind of,
right.
Yeah.
like a tradition.
We'd always talk late.
Yeah, and say our goodnights.
Yeah.
Until 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
I remember asking for you to come to one of my appointments, Kayla.
Yeah.
I kept asking for you to like come to. Yeah, you came to my kidney when I had to have a kidney biopsy.
Yeah.
And I brought you to the appointment just because I wanted you there.
Yeah.
Just
Just
cause.
'cause, yeah.
Yeah. And like, it's not like anything different would happen, but I guess like, I don't know, just in the small things, like after my appointment, I would normally go to lunch with her parents. But having you there, it would shift it from like,
More serious.
it was a lot more serious, like, okay, who's going to drive you to this appointment? Who's going to do this?
Yeah.
How's this going to work? But when you were there, it was more just like, oh, did you see this? That was funny. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's not like you were in school. It's not like I could just take you anywhere.
Having a sibling, like growing up with you alongside having your chronic illness from birth,
Yeah.
and then the main admission and all the complications happening when I was 12 affected my schooling pretty severely, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like my attendance dropped. I stopped going due to just anxiety and stress and like the uncertainty of everything. Like my attendance dropped below 50%.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, that affected my schooling quite a lot. I ended up moving schools because I just needed a fresh start, which did help a lot, thoroughly. I love my
Yeah.
new school. But the stress and anxiety was very high.
Did you ever feel like jealous of the attention?
That was overshadowed by just fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There wasn't really, I didn't have any experience of any comparison because I think,
It was the first time we've...
things were moving so fast and we knew so little. I mean, I still don't know everything.
It made us grateful for our parents. The way that they approached it was like, yes, she's giving Lani the right amount of like attention and care and everything. Did you feel like there was a shift of how we treated you?
Like from my perspective, it was isolating in terms of like, because since no one really knew anything, and like the only people that would like be up to date are like mom and dad or like our grandparents.
Yeah.
So and that's not like you can't really have that same connection with your parents compared to like a sibling.
It's just definitely so important to make the point of the fact that chronic illness in a person causes stress for the other people around them, even in ways that aren't necessarily too obvious or direct. It's not necessarily stress about the fact they're in hospital, but it's stress about everything else that's happening as a result of being in hospital. You know, the family dynamics, mum being gone, dad coming in every now and then.
Yeah. I feel like it's the little things you don't really think about.
Yeah.
End up being more stressful. It's like, oh, like, who's going to take me? Like, how am I going to get to this place? Like, even small things like that all builds up and takes a toll because it's all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, alongside, obviously, the bigger things and the obvious factors that would play a toll in stress and anxiety.
Throughout the whole experience, we did kind of get a lot more close and more comfortable. The only thing that I can compare it to would be something like our experience with COVID and lockdown as well. I felt like there was a similar kind of
Solidarity.
Exactly. We felt more united to after dealing with it. Obviously, during dealing with it, it was a bit all over the place.
I feel like I also didn't do well in terms of like communicating what I needed because I also was like in year 9. Like it's not like I'm
Ill.
it's not like I'm like ready to like sit down and have a mature conversation of what I need during my appointments and like health wise. Like I obviously didn't know. It was more just like an urge inside of me to be like, oh, I want someone else here. But I didn't know why that was. it's more just like me now being like, oh, that would have helped.
That might help for future things we go through as a family. Hopefully we don't go through anything similar. But if we do, just to make sure that we check in and ask what you need.
Yeah.
And ask not specifically you need, but ask who anyone needs.
Yeah.
Because I think every conversation was kind of like, how was it? Or, okay, like, what's next?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There wasn't really any emotional check-in. And I feel like that would have helped, especially for us as well, to be able to know what to do and things to do. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, ways that we can help, if there are ways. It's not as scary as going, like, how are you really? Like, are you okay? It's not as scary as asking that. Our family as a whole kind of gained a bit of perspective into what family is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It wasn't like we treated anyone different, but I feel like we placed a bit more weight onto appreciating each other and being grateful that we're all okay. I mean, I feel like our whole family is very proud of how hardworking you are despite your chronic illness.
Thanks so much for coming on the podcast, you guys. I'm really glad you were able to come in and just talk about your experiences on how it's like to be a sibling.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Of course, you're welcome anytime.
And thank you, Genevieve, for
Thank you for having me.
coming on. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us on the Family Roundtable for a heartfelt conversation on the impacts of illness and disability, sibling to sibling.
We hope we've decoded the dilemmas of living interdependently, co-designing a hybrid space for familial support and love among chronic conditions.
Next week, we'll close the door on household conversations because we're going back to school.
We'll be leading a lecture of sorts, Schooling and Chronic Conditions 101. For now, this is Joel and Lani signing off, and we'll see you in the next episode where we are still chronically ill.
While we strive to support you on your journeys with a chronic condition, this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional mental health advice. If you find any topics potentially triggering, please seek help from a local mental health professional or contact Kids Helpline on 1-800-55-1800 for 24-hour advice.